gods on earth. When they write my obituary, tomorrow or the next day, it will say, Leo Kirksky is survived by an apartment full of shit. I'm surprised I haven't been buried alive. The place isn't big. I have to struggle to keep a path clear between bed and toilet and kitchen table and front door. If I want to get from the toilet to the front door, impossible. I have to go by way of the kitchen table. I like to imagine the bed as home plate, the toilet as first, the kitchen table as second, the front door as third. Should the doorbell ring while I am lying in bed, I have to round the toilet and the kitchen table in order to arrive at the door. If it happens to be Bruno, I let him in without a word and then jog back to bed, the roar of the invisible crowd ringing in my ears. I often wonder who will be the last person to see me alive. If I had to bet, I'd bet on the delivery boy from the Chinese takeout. I order in 4 nights out of 7. Whenever he comes, I make a big production of finding my wallet. He stands in the door holding the greasy bag, while I wonder if this is the night I'll finish off my spring roll, climb into bed, and have a heart attack in my sleep. I try to make a point of being seen. Sometimes when I'm out, I'll buy a juice even though I'm not thirsty. If the store is crowded, I'll even go so far as dropping my change all over the floor, nickels and dimes skidding in every direction. I'll get down on my knees. It's a big effort for me to get down on my knees, and an even bigger effort to get up. And yet, maybe I look like a fool. I'll go into the athlete's foot and say, "What do you have in sneakers?" The clerk will look me over like the poor schmuck that I am and direct me over to the one pair of Rockports they carry, something in spanking white. "Nah," I'll say, "I have those already." And then I'll make my way over to the Reeboks and pick out something that doesn't even resemble a shoe, a waterproof bootie, maybe, and ask for it in size 9. The kid will look again, more carefully. He'll look at me long and hard. "Size 9, I'll repeat while I clutch the webbed shoe. He'll shake his head and go to the back for them, and by the time he returns, I'm peeling off my socks. I'll roll my pants legs up and look down at those decrepit things, my feet, and an awkward minute will pass until it becomes clear that I'm waiting for him to slip the booties onto them. I never actually buy. All I want is not to die on a day when I went unseen. A few months ago, I saw an ad in the paper. It said, "Needed nude model for drawing class, $15 an hour." It seemed too good to be true, to have so much looked at by so many. I called the number. A woman told me to come the following Tuesday. I tried to describe myself, but she wasn't interested. "Anything will do," she said. The days passed slowly. I told Bruno about it, but he misunderstood and thought I was signing up for a drawing class in order to see nude girls. He didn't want to be corrected. "They show their boobs?" he asked. I shrugged. "And down there." After Mrs. Freed on the 4th floor died, and it took 3 days before anyone found her, Bruno and I got into the habit of checking in on each other. We'd make little excuses. "I ran out of toilet paper," I'd say when Bruno opened the door. A day would pass. There would be a knock on my door. "I lost my TV guide," he'd explain. And I'd go and find him mine, even though I knew his was right there where it always was on his couch. Once it came down on a Sunday afternoon. "I need a cup of flour," he said. It was clumsy, but I couldn't help myself. "You don't know how to cook." There was a moment of silence. Bruno looked me in the eye. "What do you know?" he said. "I'm baking a cake. When I came to America, I knew hardly anyone. Only a second cousin who was a locksmith, so I worked for him. If he had been a shoemaker, I would have become a shoemaker. If he had shoveled shit, I, too, would have shoveled. But he was a locksmith. He taught me the trade. And that's what I became. We had little business together, and then one year he got TB. They had to cut his liver out, and he had a 106 temperature and died, so I took it over. I sent his wife half the profits, even after she got married to a doctor and moved to Bayside. I stayed in the business for over 50 years. It's not what I would have imagined for myself. And yet, the truth is I came to like it. I helped those in who were locked out. Others I helped keep out what couldn't be let in, so that they could sleep without nightmares. Then one day, I was looking out the window. Maybe I was contemplating the sky. Put even a fool in front of the window and you'll get a Spinoza. The afternoon passed. Darkness sifted down. I reached for the chain on the bulb and suddenly it was as if an elephant had stepped on my heart. I fell to my knees. I thought, I didn't live forever. A minute passed. Another minute. Another. I clawed at the floor, pulling myself along toward the phone. 25% of my heart muscle died. It took time to recover and I never went back to work. A year went by. I was aware of time passing for the sake of itself. I stared out the window. I watched fall turn into winter, winter into spring. Some days Bruno came downstairs to sit with me. We've known each other since we were boys. We went to school together. He was one of my closest friends, with thick glasses, reddish hair that he hated, and a voice that cracked when he was emotional. I didn't know he was still alive, and then one day I was walking down East Broadway, and I heard his voice. I turned around. His back was to me. He was standing in front of the grocer's asking for the price of some fruit. I thought, you're hearing things. You're such a dreamer. What is the likelihood? Your boyhood friend. I stood frozen on the sidewalk. He's in the ground, I told myself. Here you are in the United States of America. There's McDonald's. Get a grip. I waited just to make sure. I wouldn't have recognized his face, but the way he walked was unmistakable. He was about to pass me. I put my arm out. I didn't know what I was doing. Maybe I was seeing things. I grabbed his sleeve. Bruno, I said. He stopped and turned. At first, he seemed scared and then confused. Bruno! He looked at me. His eyes began to fill with tears. I grabbed his other hand. I had one sleeve in one hand. Bruno. He started to shake. He touched his hand on my cheek. We were in the middle of the sidewalk. People were hurrying past. It was a warm day in June. His hair was thin and white. He dropped the fruit. Bruno! A couple of years later, his wife died. It was too much to live in the apartment without her. Everything reminded him. So when an apartment opened up on the floor above me, he moved in. We often sit together at my kitchen table. The whole afternoon might go by without our saying a word. If we do talk, we never speak in Yiddish. The words of our childhood became strangers to us. We couldn't use them in the same way, and so we chose not to use them at all. Life demanded a new language. Bruno, my old faithful. I haven't sufficiently described him. Is it enough to say he is indescribable? No. Better to try and fail than to not try at all. The soft down of your white hair lightly playing about your scalp like a half-blown dandelion. Many times, Bruno, I have been tempted to blow on your head and make a wish. Only a last scrap of decorum keeps me from it. Or perhaps I should begin with your height, which is very short. On a good day, you barely reach my chest. Or shall I start with the eyeglasses you fished out of the box and claimed as your own, enormous round things that magnify your eyes so that your permanent response appears to be a 4.5 on the Richter? They're women's glasses, Bruno. I've never had the heart to tell you. Many times I've tried. And something else. When we were boys, you were the greater writer. I had too much pride to tell you then, but I knew. Believe me when I say I knew it then as I know it now. It pains me to think how I never told you, and also to think of all you could have been. Forgive me, Bruno. My oldest friend. My best. I haven't done you justice. You have given me such company at the end of my life. You, especially you, who might have found the words for it all. Once, Taped to his chest was a note. 3 words. Goodbye, my loves. I shouted out, No, Bruno, no, 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 no. I slapped his face. At last his eyes fluttered open. His gaze was blank and dull. Wake up, you dumb cop. I shouted. Listen to me now. You have to wake up. His eyes drifted closed again. I dialed 911. I filled a bowl with cold water and threw it on him. I put my ear to his heart. Far off, a vague rustle. The ambulance came. At the hospital, they pumped his stomach. Why did you take all those pills? The doctor asked. Bruno, sick, exhausted, coolly raised his eyes. Why do you think I took all those pills? He shrieked. The recovery room turned silent. Everyone stared. Bruno groaned and turned toward the wall. That night, I put him to bed. Bruno, I said. So sorry, he said. So selfish. I sighed and turned to go. Stay with me, he cried. We never spoke of it after that, just as we never spoke of our childhoods, of the dreams we shared and lost, everything that happened and didn't happen. Once we were sitting silently together. Suddenly, one of us began to laugh. It was contagious. There was no reason for our laughter, but we began to giggle, and the next thing we were rocking in our seats and howling with laughter. Tears streaming down our cheeks. A wet spot bloomed in my crotch, and that made us laugh harder. I was banging the table and fighting for air. I thought, maybe this is how I'll go, in a fit of laughter. What could be better? Laughing and crying, laughing and singing, laughing so as not to forget that I am alone, that it is the end of my life, that death is waiting outside the door for me. When I was a boy, I liked to write. It was the only thing I wanted to do with my life. I invented imaginary people and filled notebooks with their stories. I wrote about a boy who grew up and got so hairy people hunted him for his fur. He had to hide in the trees, and he fell in love with a bird who thought she was a 300-pound gorilla. I wrote about Siamese twins, one of which was in love with me. I thought the sex scenes were purely original. And yet, when I got older, I decided I wanted to be a real writer. I tried to write about real things. I wanted to describe the world because to live in an undescribed world was too lonely. I wrote 3 books before I was 21. Who knows what happened to them? The first was about Slanim, the town where I lived, which was sometimes Poland and sometimes Russia. I drew a map of it. For the frontispiece, labeling the houses and shops. Here was Kipnis, the butcher, and here Krasinski, the tailor, and here lived Official Shapiro, who was either a great tzaddik or an idiot. No one could decide. And here the square and the field where we played. And here was where the river got wide, and here narrow. And here the forest began. And here stood the tree from which Bela Ash hanged herself. And here, and here. And yet, when I gave it to the only person in Slamin whose opinion I cared about, she just shrugged and said she liked it better when I made things up. So I wrote a second book, and I made up everything. I filled it with men who grew wings, and trees with their roots going into the sky, people who forgot their own names, and people who couldn't forget anything. I even made up words. When it was finished, I ran all the way to her house. I raced to the door, up the stairs, and handed it to the only person in Slanim whose opinion I cared about. I leaned against the wall and watched her face as she read. It grew dark out, but she kept reading. Hours went by. I slid to the floor. She read and read. When she finished, she looked up. For a long time, she didn't speak. Then she said, maybe I shouldn't make up everything, because that made it hard to believe anything. Another person might have given up. I started again. This time, I didn't write about real things, and I didn't write about imaginary things. I wrote about the only thing I knew. The pages piled up. Even after the only person whose opinion I cared about left on a boat for America, I continued to fill pages with her name. of unfathomable things, and because we couldn't fathom them, we failed to believe them, until we had no choice and it was too late. I was working in Minsk, but I lost my job and went home to Slonim. The Germans pushed east. They got closer and closer. The morning we heard their tanks approaching, my mother told me to hide in the woods. I wanted to take my youngest brother, he was only 13, but she said she would take him herself. Why did I listen? Because it was easier. I ran out to the woods. I lay still on the ground. Dogs barked in the distance. Hours went by. And then the shots. So many shots. For some reason, they didn't scream. Or maybe I couldn't hear their screams. Afterwards, only silence. My body was numb. I remember I tasted blood in my mouth. I don't know how much time passed. Days. I never went back. When I got up again, I'd shed the only part of me that I'd ever thought I'd find words for even the smallest bit of life. And yet, a couple of months after my heart attack, 57 years after I'd given it up, I started to write again. I did it for myself alone, not for anyone else, and that was the difference. It didn't matter if I found the words. And more than that, I knew it would be impossible to find the right ones. And because I accepted that what I'd once believed was possible was in fact impossible, and because I knew I would never show a word of it to anyone, I wrote a sentence. Once upon a time, there was a boy. It remained there, staring up from the otherwise blank page for days. The next week, I added another. Soon there was a whole page. It made me happy, like talking aloud to myself, which I sometimes do. Once I said to Bruno, "Take a guess. How many pages do you think I have?" "No idea," he said. "Write a number," I said, "and slip it across the table." He shrugged and took a pen out of his pocket. He thought for a minute or two, studying my face. "A ballpark guess," I said. He hunched over his napkin, scrawled a number, and turned it over. I wrote down the real number, 301, on my own napkin. We pushed the napkins across the table. I picked up Bruno's. For reasons I can't explain, he had written 200,000. He picked up my napkin and turned it over. His face fell. At times I believed that the last page of my book and the last page of my life were one and the same. That when my book ended, I'd end. A great wind would sweep through my rooms, carrying the pages away. And when the air cleared all of those fluttering white sheets, the room would be silent. The chair where I sat would be empty. Every morning, I wrote a little more. 301. It's not nothing. Now and then, when I've finished, I'd go to the movies. It's always a big event for me. Maybe I buy some popcorn and, if people are around who look, spill it. I like to sit up front. I like for the screen to fill my whole view so that there is nothing to distract me from the moment. And then I want the moment to last forever. I can't tell you how happy it makes me to watch it up there, blown up. I would say larger than life, but I've never understood that expression. What is larger than life? To sit in the front row and look up at a beautiful girl's face, 2 stories high, and have the vibrations of her voice massaging your legs, is to be reminded of the size of life. So I sit in the front row. If I leave with a crick in my neck and a fading heart on, it was a good seat. I'm not a dirty man. I'm a man who wanted to be as large as life. There are passages of my book I know by heart. By heart. This is not an expression I use lightly. My heart is weak and unreliable. When I go, it will be my heart. I try to burden it as little as possible. If I'm at the bus stop and some kids come up behind me and say, "Who smells that?" Small daily humiliations. These I take, generally speaking, in my liver. Other damages I take in other places. The pancreas I reserve for being struck by all that's been lost. It's true that there's so much, and the organ is so small, but you would be surprised how much it can take. All I feel is a quick, sharp pain, and then it's over. Sometimes I imagine my own autopsy. Disappointment in myself, right kidney. Disappointment of others in me, left kidney. Personal failures, kishkas. I don't mean to make it sound like I've made a science of it. It's not that well thought out. I take it where it comes. It's just that I notice certain patterns. When the clocks are turned forward and the dark falls before I'm ready. This, for reasons I can't explain, I feel in my wrists. And when I wake up and my fingers are stiff, almost certainly I was dreaming of my childhood. The field where we used to play, the field in which everything was discovered and everything was possible. We ran so hard we thought we would spit blood. To me, that is the sound of childhood, heavy breathing and shoes scraping the hard earth. Stiffness of the fingers is the dream of childhood, as it's been returned to me at the end of my life. I have to run them under the hot water, steam clouding the mirror, outside the rustle of pigeons. Yesterday I saw a man kicking a dog, and I felt it behind my eyes. I don't know what to call this. A place before tears. The pain of forgetting. Spine. The pain of remembering. Spine. All the times I have suddenly realized that my parents are dead, even now, it still surprises me to exist in the world while that which made me has ceased to exist. My knees. It takes half a tube of pen K and a big production just to pen them. To everything a season, to every time I've woken only to make the mistake of believing for a moment that someone was sleeping beside me. A hemorrhoid. Loneliness. There is no organ that can take it all. Every morning, a little more. Once upon a time there was a boy. He lived in a village that no longer exists, in a house that no longer exists, on the edge of a field that no longer exists, where everything was discovered and everything was possible. A stick could be a sword, a pebble could be a diamond, a tree, a castle. Once upon a time there was a boy who lived in a house across the field from a girl who no longer exists. They made up 1,000 games. She was a queen and he was king. In the autumn light, her hair shone like a crown. They collected the world in small handfuls. When the sky grew dark, they parted with leaves in their hair. Once upon a time there was a boy who loved a girl, and her laughter was a question he wanted to spend his whole life answering. When they were 10, he asked her to marry him. When they were 11, he kissed her for the first time. When they were 13, they got into a fight, and for 3 weeks they didn't talk. When they were 15, she showed him the scar on her left breast. Their love was a secret. They told no one. He promised her he would never love another girl as long as he lived. "What if I die?" she asked. Even then, he said. For her 16th birthday, he gave her an English dictionary, and together they learned the words. "What's this?" he'd ask, tracing his index finger around her ankle. And she'd look it up. "And this?" he'd ask, kissing her elbow. "Elbow? What kind of word is that?" And then he'd lick it, making her giggle. "What about this?" he asked, touching the soft skin behind her ear. "I don't know," she said, turning off the flashlight and rolling over with a sigh onto her back. When they were 17, they made love for the first time on a bed of straw in a shed. Later, when things happened that they could never have imagined, she wrote him a letter that said, "When will you learn that there isn't a word for everything?" Once upon a time there was a boy who loved a girl whose father was shrewd enough to scrounge together all the slotty he had to send his youngest daughter to America. At first she refused to go, but the boy also knew enough to insist, swearing on his life one said why. He returned home in the summer of 1941. The Einsatzgruppen drove deeper east, killing hundreds of thousands of Jews. On a bright, hot day in July, they entered Slonim. At that hour, the boy happened to be lying on his back in the woods thinking about the girl. You could say it was his love for her that saved him. In the years that followed, the boy became a man who became invisible. In this way, he escaped death. Once upon a time, a man who had become invisible arrived in America. He'd spent 3.5 years hiding, mostly in trees, but also cracks, cellars, holes. Then it was over. The Russian tanks rolled in. For 6 months, he lived in a displaced persons camp. He got word to his cousin, who was a locksmith in America. In his head, he practiced over and over the only words he knew in English. Knee, elbow, ear. Finally, his papers came through. He took a train to a boat, and after a week, he arrived in New York Harbor. A cool day in November. Folded in his hand was the address of the girl. That night, he lay awake on the floor of his cousin's room. The radiator changed and hissed, but he was grateful for the warmth. In the morning, his cousin explained to him 3 times how to take the subway to Brooklyn. He bought a bunch of roses, but they wilted because though his cousin had explained the way 3 times, he still got lost. At last he found the place. Only as his finger pressed the doorbell did the thought cross his mind that perhaps he should have called. She opened the door. She wore a blue scarf over her hair. He could hear the broadcast of a ball game through the neighbor's wall. Once upon a time, the woman who had been a girl got on a boat to America and threw up the whole way, not because she was seasick, but because she was pregnant. When she found out, she wrote to the boy. Every day she waited for a letter from him, but none came. She got bigger and bigger. She tried to hide it so she wouldn't lose her job at the dress factory where she worked. A few weeks before the baby was born, she got news from someone who heard they were killing Jews in Poland. Where? She asked, but no one knew where. She stopped going to work. She couldn't bring herself to get out of bed. After a week, the son of her boss came to see her. He brought her food to eat and put a bouquet of flowers in a vase by her bed. When he found out she was pregnant, he called a midwife. A baby boy was born. One day, the girl sat up in bed and saw the son of her boss rocking her child in the sunlight. A few months later, she agreed to marry him. 2 years later, she had another child. The man who had become invisible stood in her living room, listening to all of this. He was 25 years old. He had changed so much since he last saw her, and now part of him wanted to laugh a hard, cold laugh. She gave him a small photograph of the boy, who was now 5. Her hand was shaking. She said, "You stopped writing. I thought you were dead." He looked at the photograph of the boy who would grow up to look like him, who, although the man didn't know it then, would go to college, fall in love, fall out of love, become a famous writer. "What's his name?" he asked. She said, "I called him Isaac." They stood for a long time in silence as he stared at the picture. At last, he managed 3 words. "Come with me." The sound of children shouting came from the street below. She squeezed her eyes shut. "Come with me," he said, holding out his hand. Tears rolled down her face. 3 times he asked her. She shook her head. "I can't," she said. She looked down at the floor. "Please," she said. And so he did the hardest thing he'd ever done in his life. He picked up his hat and walked away. And if the man who once upon a time had been a boy, who promised he'd never fall in love with another girl as long as he lived, kept his promise. It wasn't because he was stubborn or even loyal. He couldn't help it. And having hidden for 3.5 years, hiding his love for a son who didn't know he existed didn't seem unthinkable. Not if it was what the only woman he would ever love needed him to do. After all, what did it mean for a man to hide one more thing when he has vanished completely? The night before I was scheduled to model for the art class, I was nervous and excited. I unbuttoned my shirt and took that off. Then I unbuckled my pants and took off those, my undershirt, the underpants. I stood in front of the hall mirror in my socks. I could hear the cries of children in the playground across the street. The string for the bulb was overhead, but I didn't pull it. I stood looking at myself in what light was left. I've never thought of myself as handsome. As a child, my mother and my aunts used to tell me that I would grow up to become handsome. It was clear to me that I wasn't anything to look at then, but I believed that some measure of beauty might come to me eventually. I don't know what I thought, that my ears, which stuck out at an undignified angle, would recede, that my head would somehow grow to fit them, that my hair, not unlike a toilet brush in texture, would, with time, unkick itself and reflect light, that my face, which held so little promise, eyelids as heavy as a frog's, lips on the thin side, would somehow transform itself into something not regrettable. For years I would wake up in the morning and go to the mirror, hoping. Even when I was too old to continue hoping, I still did. I grew older and there was no improvement. If anything, things went downhill when I entered adolescence. The year of my bar mitzvah, I was visited by a plague of acne that stayed for 4 years. But still I continued to hope. As soon as the acne cleared, my hairline began to recede, as if it wanted to disassociate itself from the embarrassment of my face. My ears, pleased with the new attention they now enjoyed, seemed to strain farther into the spotlight. My eyelids drooped, some muscle tension had to give to support the struggle of my ears, and the eyebrows took on a life of their own, achieving all anyone could have hoped for them, and then surpassing those hopes and approaching Neanderthal. For years I continued to hope that things would turn out differently, but I never looked in the mirror and confused what I saw for anything but what it was. With time I thought about it less and less, then hardly at all. And yet, it's possible that some small part of me has never stopped hoping, that even now there are moments when I stand in front of the mirror, my wrinkled pisser of my hand, and believe my beauty is yet to come. The morning of the class, September 19th, I woke up in a state of excitement. I got dressed and ate my breakfast bar of meat mousel, then went to the bathroom and waited in anticipation. Nothing for half an hour, but my optimism didn't wane. Then I managed a series of pellets. Full of hope, I waited some more. It's not impossible that I will die sitting on the toilet, pants around my ankles. After all, I spent so much time there, all of this raising another question, namely, who will be the first person to see me dead? I gave myself a sponge bath and dressed. The day crawled on. When I'd waited as long as I could, I took a bus across town. The newspaper ad was folded into a square in my pocket, and I took it out a few times to look at the address, even though I knew it by heart. It took me a while to find the right building. At first, I thought there was some mistake. I passed it 3 times until I realized it had to be the one. It was an old warehouse. The front door was rusted and held open with was an ad in the paper. Maybe I have the wrong place. I fumbled in my coat pocket for the ad. She gestured upstairs. Second floor, first room on the right. But it doesn't start for another hour. I looked up at the building, I said. I thought I might get lost, so I came early. She was shivering. I took off my raincoat. Here, wear this. You'll get sick. She shrugged, but didn't move to take it. I held my arm outstretched until it was clear she wasn't going to. There was nothing more to say. There were steps, so I went up them. My heart was beating. I considered turning back, past the girl, down the rubbish-filled street, through the city, to my apartment where there was work to be done. What kind of fool was I to think that they wouldn't turn away when I took off my shirt and dropped my pants and stood naked before them? To think that they would observe my varicose-veined legs, my hairy, sagging nettelac, and start to sketch. And yet, I didn't turn back. I gripped the banister and climbed the stairs. I could hear the rain on the skylight. A dirty light filtered through. At the top of the stairs there was a hallway. To the left was a room where a man was painting a large canvas. The room on the right was empty. There was a block covered in a length of black velvet, and a disorganized circle of folding chairs and easels. I went in and sat down to wait. After half an hour, people started to wander in. A woman asked me who I was. I'm here about the ad, I told her. I called and spoke to someone. To my relief, she seemed to understand. She showed me where to change, a corner where a makeshift curtain had been hung. I stood there and she pulled it around me. I heard her footsteps move away, and still I stood there. A moment passed, and then I removed my shoes. I lined them up neatly. I took off my socks and put those into the shoes. I unbuttoned my shirt and took that off. There was a hanger, so I hung it. I heard chairs scraping and then laughter. Suddenly, I didn't care anymore about being seen. I would have liked to grab my shoes and slip out of the room, down the stairs, and away from there. And yet, I unzipped my pants. Then it occurred to me, what exactly did nude mean? Did they really mean no underwear? I deliberated. What if they expected underwear and I came out with my you-know-what swinging? I reached for the ad in the pocket of my pants. Nude model, it said. Don't be an idiot, I told myself. These aren't amateurs. The underwear was down around my knees when the woman's footsteps returned. Are you all right in there? Someone opened a window and a car splashed past in the rain. Fine. I'll be out in a moment. I looked down. There was a tiny smear. My bowels. They never ceased to appall me. I stepped out of my underwear and crumpled it into a ball. I thought, maybe I've come here to die after all. Wasn't it true that I had never seen the warehouse before? Maybe these were what they called angels. The girl outside, of course. How could I have not noticed? She had been so pale. I stood without moving. I was starting to get cold. I thought, so this is how death takes you, naked in an abandoned warehouse. Tomorrow Bruno would come downstairs and knock on my door, and there would be no answer. Forgive me, Bruno. I would have liked to say goodbye. I'm sorry to have disappointed you with so few pages. Then I thought, my book. Who would find it? Would it be thrown away along with the rest of my things? Even though I thought I'd been writing it for myself, the truth was that I wanted someone to read it. I closed my eyes and inhaled. Who would wash my body? Who would say the mourner's Kaddish? I thought. My mother's hands. I pulled back the curtain. My heart was in my throat. I stepped forward. Squinting in the light, I stood before them. I was never a man of great ambition. I cried too easily. I didn't have a head for science. Words often failed me. While others prayed, I only moved my lips. Please. The woman who'd shown me where to change pointed to the box draped in velvet. Stand there. I walked across the floor. There were maybe 12 of them, sitting in chairs holding their drawing pads. The girl in the big sweater was there. Anything that feels comfortable, she said. smile. Already my body was starting to revolt, the knees beginning to shake and the back muscles straining. But I didn't care. If need be, I would stand there all day. 15-20 minutes passed. Then the woman said, "Why don't we take a quick break and then we'll start again with a different pose?" I sat. I stood. I rotated so that who hadn't gotten my rectal side now got it. Pages turned. It went on. I didn't know how long. Once I thought I would pass out. I cycled through feeling to numbness to feeling to numbness. My eyes watered with pain. Somehow I got back into my clothes. I couldn't find my underwear and was too tired to look. I made it down the stairs, clutching the banister. The woman came down after me. She said, "Wait, you forgot the $15. I took it, and when I went to put it in my pocket, I felt the ball of underwear there. Thank you. I meant that. I was exhausted, but happy. I want to say somewhere, I've tried to be forgiving, and yet, there were times in my life, whole years, when anger got the better of me. Ugliness turned me inside out. There was a certain satisfaction in bitterness. I courted it. It was standing outside, and I invited it in. I scowled at the world, and the world scowled back. We were locked in a state of mutual disgust. I used to let the door slam in people's faces. I farted where I wanted to fart. I accused cashiers of cheating me out of a penny while holding the penny in my hand. And then one day I realized I was on my way to being the sort of schmuck who poisons pigeons. People crossed the street to avoid me. I was a human cancer, and to be honest, I wasn't really angry. Not anymore. I had left my anger somewhere long ago, put it down on a park bench and walked away. And yet, it had been so long, I didn't know any other way of being. One day I woke up and said to myself, "It's not too late." First days were strange. I had to practice smiling in front of the mirror, but it came back to me. It was as if a weight had been lifted. I let go, and something let go of me. A couple of months later, I found Bruno. When I got home from the art class, there was a note from Bruno on my door. It said, "Where are you?" I was too tired to try to climb the stairs to tell him. Inside it was dark, and I pulled the string for the bulb in the hallway. I saw myself in the mirror. My hair, what was left of it, stuck up in the back like a wave at its crest. My face looked shriveled like something left out in the rain. I fell into bed, still wearing my clothes minus the underwear. It was past midnight when the telephone rang. I awoke from a dream in which I was teaching my brother Joseph how to pee in an ark. Sometimes I have nightmares, but this wasn't one. We were in the woods, the cold pit at our behinds. Steam rose from the snow. Joseph turned to me, smiling. A beautiful child, blonde with gray eyes. Gray like the ocean on a sunless day, or the elephant I saw in the town square when I was his age. Plain as day, standing in the dusty sunlight. Later, no one could remember having seen it, and because it was impossible to understand how an elephant would have arrived and slain him, no one believed me. But I saw it. A siren sounded in the distance, just as my brother opened his mouth to speak. The dream broke off, and I woke up in the darkness of my bedroom, the rain pit-pattering on the glass. The telephone continued to ring. Bruno, no doubt, would have ignored it. If I hadn't been afraid, he'd call the police. Why wouldn't he just tap on the radiator with his walking stick like he always does? 3 taps means, "Are you alive?" 2 means, yes. 1, no. We only do it at night. During the day, there are too many other noises. And, anyway, it isn't foolproof since usually Bruno falls asleep wearing his Walkman. I threw off the sheets and stumbled across the floor, banging into the table leg. "Hello?" I shouted into the phone, but the line was dead. I hung up, went to the kitchen, and took a glass down from the cabinet. The water gurgled in the pipes and splattered out in a burst. I drank some down and then remembered my plant. I've had it for almost 10 years. It's barely alive, but it is alive. More brown than green. There are parts that have creativity. I poured the rest of my water into its pot. What does it mean, anyway? To flourish. A moment later, the phone rang again. Okay, I said, picking up the receiver. No need to wake the whole building. There was silence on the other line. I said, Bruno, is this Leo Gartsky? I assumed it was someone trying to sell me something. They're always calling to sell. Once they said if I sent in a check for $99, I'd be pre-approved for a credit card, and I said, right, sure. And if I step under a pigeon, I'm pre-approved for a load of shit. But the man said he wasn't trying to sell me anything. He'd locked himself out of his house. He'd called information for the number of a locksmith. I told him I was retired. The man paused. He seemed unable to believe his bad luck. He'd already called 3 other people, and no one answered. It's pouring out there, he said. Couldn't you stay somewhere else for the night? In the morning it'll be easy to find a locksmith. They're a dime a dozen. No, he said. All right, I mean, if it's too much, he began, then paused, waiting for me to speak up. I didn't. Okay then. I could hear the disappointment in his voice. Sorry to have disturbed you. And yet he didn't hang up, and neither did I. I was filled with guilt. I thought, what do I need with sleep? There will be time, tomorrow or the next day. Okay, I said, even though I didn't want to say it. I'd have to dig up my tools. I might as well be looking for a needle in a haystack, or a Jew in Poland. Hold on a second, will you? I'm getting a pen. He gave me an address all the way uptown. Only after I hung up did I remember I could wait forever before a bus came at that hour. I had the card in the kitchen drawer for Gold Star car service. Not that I ever call it, but you never know. I ordered a car and started digging through the hall closet for my toolbox. Instead, I found the box of old eyeglasses. Who knows where I got them? Someone probably selling it on the street with some mismatched china and a doll with no head. From time to time, I try on a pair. Once I cooked an omelet wearing a pair of ladies' reading glasses. It was a mammoth omelet. It struck fear in my heart just to look at it. I fished around in the box and pulled out a pair. They were square and flesh-colored, with lenses half an inch thick. I slipped them on. The floor dropped from under me, and when I tried to take a step, it lurched upwards. I staggered toward the hall mirror. In an effort to gain some focus, I zoomed in, but miscalculated, and banged into the glass. The buzzer rang. When your pants are down around your ankles, that's when everyone arrives. I'll be down in a minute, I shouted into the speaker. When I took off the glasses, the toolbox was there under my nose. I ran my hand across its battered top. Then I grabbed my raincoat off the floor, smoothed down my hair in the mirror, and went out. Bruno's note was still taped to the door. I crumpled it into my pocket. A black limousine idled in the street, rain falling in the headlights. Other than that, there were only a few empty cars parked along the curb. I was about to go back into the building, but the limousine driver rolled down the window and called my name. He wore a purple turban. I walked up to the window. There must be a mistake, I said. I ordered a car. Okay, he said. But this is a limousine, I pointed out. Okay, he repeated, motioning me in. I can't pay extra. The turban bobbed, he said. Get in before you get soaking. I ducked inside. There were leather seats and a pair of crystal liquor bottles along the sideboard. It was bigger than I'd imagined. The soft, exotic music coming from up front and the gentle rhythm of the windshield wipers only barely reached me. He pointed the nose of the car into the street, and we headed into the night. The traffic lights bled into the puddles. I opened a crystal bottle, but it was empty. There was a little jar of peppermints, and I filled my pockets. When I looked down, my fly was open. I sat up and cleared my throat. Ladies and gentlemen, I'll do my best to keep this brief. You've all been so patient. The truth is, I'm shocked, really. I'm pinching myself. An honor I could have only dreamed of. The Gold Star Lifetime Achievement Award. I'm practically speechless. Has it really been? And yet, yes, all of the evidence suggests a lifetime. We made our way through the city. I walked through all of those neighborhoods Sunday I might have spent just walking. Once, years ago, I found myself in front of the botanical garden and went in to see the cherry trees. I bought some Cracker Jacks and watched the fat lazy goldfish swimming in their pool. There was a wedding party taking photographs under a tree. The white blossoms made it look as if it alone had been caught in a snowstorm. I found my way to the tropical greenhouse. It was another world in sight. Wet and warm, like the breath of people making love, had been trapped there. With my finger, I wrote on the glass, Leo Kirksky. The limousine came to a stop. I put my face up to the window. Which one? The driver pointed to a townhouse. It was beautiful, with steps up to the door and leaves carved in stone. $17, the driver said. I felt in my pocket for my wallet. No, other pocket. Bruno's note. My underwear from earlier that day, but no wallet. Both pockets of the coat. No. I must have left it home in the rush. Then I remembered my fee from the art class. I dug past the peppermints, the note, the underwear, and came up with it. Sorry, I said. How embarrassing. All I have on me is 15. I admit I was reluctant to part with the bills. Hard-earned wasn't the word for them, but something else. More bittersweet. But after a brief pause, the turban bobbed and the money was accepted. The man was standing under the doorway. Of course, he hadn't expected me in a limousine, and out I'd popped, like Mr. Locksmith to the stars. I was humiliated. I wanted to explain, believe me. I'd never mistake myself for anyone special, but it was pouring still, and I thought he needed me more than he needed any explanation of how I got there. His hair was matted down from the rain. He thanked me 3 times for coming. It's nothing, I said, and yet I knew I almost hadn't come. It was a tricky lock. The man stood above me, holding my flashlight. The rain was dripping down the back of my neck. I felt how much depended on my unlocking that lock. The minutes passed. I tried and failed. And then, at last, my heart started to race. I turned the handle, and the door slipped open. We stood dripping in the hallway. He took off his shoes, so I took off mine. He thanked me again, and went to change into dry clothes and call me a car. I tried to protest, saying I would take the bus or hail a taxi, but he wouldn't hear of it. What with the rain? He left me in the living room. I wandered into the dining room, and from there I caught sight of a room full of books. I'd never seen so many books in one place that wasn't a library. I walked in. I, too, like to read. Once a month I go to the local branch. For myself, I pick a novel, and for Bruno, with his cataracts, a book on tape. At first he was doubtful. What am I supposed to do with this, he asked, looking at the box set of Anna Karenina, like I'd handed him an enema. And yet, a day or two later, I was going about my business when a voice from above bellowed, coast to coast to Lenki. He's lived there for so long he can't remember why God put him on earth. Every night the angel talks aloud to God, and every day he waits for some words from him. To pass the time, he walks through the city. In the beginning, he's in the habit of marveling at everything. He starts a collection of pebbles, teaches himself difficult math, and yet, with each day that passes, he's blinded a little less by the beauty of the world. At night, the angel lies awake listening to the footsteps of the widow who lives above him, and every morning on the stairs he passes the old man, Mr. Grossmark, who spends his days dragging himself upstairs and down, muttering, "Who's there?" So far as he can tell, that's all he ever says, except for once when, out of nowhere, he turned to the angel as he passed on the stairs and said, "Who am I?" Which so startled the angel, who never speaks and is never spoken to, that he said nothing, not even, "You're Grossmark, the human being." The more sadness he sees, the more his heart begins to turn against God. He starts to roam the streets at night, stopping for anyone who looks like they need an ear. The things he hears, it's too much. He can't understand it. When he asks God why he's made him so useless, the angel's voice cracks, trying to hold back angry tears. Eventually, he stops talking to God altogether. One night, he meets a man under a bridge. They share the vodka the man has in a brown bag. And because the angel is drunk and lonely and angry with God, and because, without his even knowing it, he feels the urge, familiar among humans, to confide in someone, he tells the man the truth, that he's an angel. The man doesn't believe him, but the angel insists. The man asks him to prove it, and so the angel lifts his shirt despite the cold and shows the man the perfect circle on his chest, which is the mark of an angel. But that means nothing to the man, who doesn't know from the mark of angels. So he says, "Show me something God can do." And the angel, naive like all angels, points to the man. And because the man thinks he's lying, he punches the angel in the stomach, sending him tottering backwards off the pier and plunging into the dark river, where he drowns, because one thing about angels is that they can't swim. Alone in that room full of books, I held my son's book in my hands. It was the middle of the night. Past the middle, I thought, poor Bruno. By now he's probably called the morgue to find out if anyone brought in an old man with an index card in his wallet that says, "My name is Leo Gerksky. I have no family. Please call Pine Lawn Cemetery. I have a plot there in the Jewish part. Thank you for your consideration." I turned my son's book over to look at his photograph. We met once. Not met, but stood face to face. It was at a reading at the 92nd Street Y. I bought tickets 4 months in advance. Many times in my life, I'd imagined our meeting. I as his father, he as my son. And yet, I knew it never could happen, not the way I wanted. I'd accepted that the most I could hope for was a place in the audience. But during the reading, something came over me. Afterwards, I found myself standing in line, my hands shaking, as I pressed into his the scrap of paper on which I'd written my name. He glanced at it and copied it into a book. I tried to say something, but there was no sound. He smiled and thanked me. And yet, I didn't budge. "Is there something else?" he asked. I flapped my hands. The woman behind me gave me an impatient look and pushed forward to greet him. Like a fool, I flapped. What could he do? He signed the woman's book. It was uncomfortable for everyone. I was listed. That night, before I went to sleep, I opened the book, which I'd put on my bedside table. To Leon Gursky, it said. I was still holding the book when the man whose door had unlocked came up behind me. You know it? He asked. I dropped it, and it landed with a thud at my feet, my son's face staring up. I didn't know what I was doing. I tried to explain. I'm his father, I said. Or maybe I said, he's my son. Whatever it was, I got the point across because the man looked shocked, and then he looked surprised, and then he looked like he didn't believe me, which was fine with me, because after all, who did I think I was, showing up in a limousine, picking a lock, and then claiming to be the progenitor of a famous writer? Suddenly I was tired, more tired than I'd been in years. I leaned over, picked the book up, and put it back on the shelf. The man kept looking at me, but just then the car honked outside, which was lucky because I'd had enough of being looked at for one day. Well, I said, making my way toward the front door, I'd better be going. The man reached for his wallet, took out $100 bill, and handed it to me. His father? He asked. I pocketed the money and handed him a complimentary peppermint. I stuffed my feet into my wet shoes. Not really his father, I said. And because I didn't know what else to say, I said, more like his uncle. This seemed to confuse him enough, but just in case I added, not exactly his uncle. He raised his eyebrows. I picked up my toolbox and stepped out into the rain. He tried to thank me again for coming, but I was already on my way down the stairs. I got into the car. He was still standing in the doorway, looking out. To prove that I was off my rocker, I gave him the Queen's wave. It was 3 in the morning when I got home. I climbed into bed. I was exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. I lay on my back, listening to the rain and thinking about my book. I'd never given it a title, because what does a book need with a title unless someone is going to read it? I got out of bed and went to the kitchen. I keep my manuscript in a box in the oven. I took it out, set it on the kitchen table, and rolled a sheet of paper into the typewriter. For a long time, I sat looking at the blank page. With 2 fingers, I picked out a title, Laughing and Crying. I studied it for a few minutes. It wasn't right. I added another, Laughing and Crying and Writing. Then another, Laughing and Crying and Writing and Waiting. I crumpled it into a ball and dropped it on the floor. I put the water on to boil. Outside, the rain had stopped. A pigeon cooed on the windowsill. It puffed up its body, marched back and forth, and took flight. Free as a bird, so to speak, I fed another page into the machine and typed, Words for everything. Before I could change my mind again, I rolled it out, laid it on top of the stack, and closed the lid of the box. I found some brown paper and packaged it up. On the front, I wrote my son's address, which I know by heart. I waited for something to happen, but nothing did. No wind that swept everything away. No heart attack. No angel at my door. It was 5 in the morning. It would be hours before the post office opened. To pass the time, I dragged the slide projector out from under the sofa. It's something I do on special occasions, my birthday, say. I propped the projector up on a shoebox, plug it in, and flip the switch. A dusty beam lights up the wall. The slide I keep in a jar on the kitchen shelf. I blow on it, drop it in, advance. The picture comes into focus. A house with a yellow door at the edge of a field. It's the end of autumn. Between the black branches, the sky is turning orange, then dark blue. Wood smoke rises from the chimney, and through the window I can almost see my mother leaning over a table. I run towards the house. I can feel the cold wind against my cheeks. I reach out my hand, and because my head is full of dreams, for a moment I believe I could open the door and go right through it. Outside, it was already getting light. Before my eyes, the house of my childhood dissolved to almost nothing. I turned off the projector, ate a Metamucil bar, through the closet for my suit. I found the galoshes I'd been looking for and an old radio. At last, crumpled on the floor, the suit, a white summer suit, passable if you ignored the brownish stain down the front. I dressed myself. I spat into my palm and forced my hair into submission. I sat fully dressed with the brown paper package on my lap. I checked and rechecked the address. At 8:45, I put my raincoat on and tucked the package under my arm. I looked at myself in the hall mirror one last time. Then I went out the door and into the morning. It looks like this second chapter is called My Mother's Sadness, and then it's just a list. So, 1. My name is Alma Singer. When I was born, my mother named me after every girl in a book my father gave her called The History of Love. She named my brother Emanuel James after the Jewish historian Emanuel Ringelblum, who buried milk cans filled with testimony in the Warsaw Ghetto, and the Jewish cellist Emanuel Fuhrman, who was one of the great musical prodigies of the 20th century, and also the Jewish writer of genius Isaac Emanuelovich Babel, and her uncle James, who was a joker, a real clown, made everyone laugh like crazy, and who died by the Nazis. But my brother refused to answer to it. When people asked him his name, he made something up. He went through 15 or 20 names. For a month, he referred to himself in the third person as Mr. Fruit. On his 6th birthday, he took a running leap out of a second-floor window and tried to fly. He broke his arm and got a permanent scar on his forehead, but from then on, nobody ever called him anything but Bird. 2. What I am not. My brother and I used to play a game. I'd point to a chair. This is not a chair, I'd say. Bird would point to the table. This is not a table. This is not a wall, I'd say. This is not a ceiling. We'd go on like that. It is not raining out. My shoe is not untied. Bird would yell. I'd point to my elbow. This is not a scrape. Bird would lift his knee. This is also not a scrape. This is not a kettle. Not a cup. Not a spoon. Not dirty dishes. We denied whole rooms, years, weathers. Once, at the peak of our shouting, Bird took a deep breath. At the top of his lungs, he shrieked, I have not been unhappy my whole life. But you're only 7, I said. 3. My brother believes in God. When he was 9.5, he found a little red volume called The Book of Jewish Thoughts, inscribed to our father, David Singer, on the occasion of his bar mitzvah. In it, Jewish thoughts are gathered under subheadings such as Every Israelite holds the honor of his entire people in his hands, under the Romanovs, and Immortality. Soon after he found it, Bert started to wear a black velvet kippah around everywhere, not caring that it didn't fit right and puffed up in the back, giving him a dopey look. He also got in the habit of following Mr. Goldstein, the janitor at Hebrew school, who mumbled in 3 languages, and whose hands left behind more dust than they cleaned away. There were rumors that Mr. Goldstein slept only an hour a night in the basement of the shul. Then in a labor camp in Siberia, that his heart was weak, that a loud noise could kill him, that snow made him cry. Bird was drawn to him. He followed him around after Hebrew school while Mr. Goldstein vacuumed between the rows of seats, cleaned the toilets, and rubbed curses off the blackboard. It was Mr. Goldstein's job to take out of circulation the old sidars that were torn or ripped. At one afternoon, with 2 crows almost everything, but sometimes words will come back to me. Kum, shemesh, chol, yam, etz, neshika, motek. Their meanings weren't off like the faces of old coins. My mother, who was English, met him while she was working on a kibbutz not far from Ashdod, the summer before she started Oxford. He was 10 years older than she was. He'd been in the army and afterwards traveled through South America. Then he went back to school and became an engineer. He liked to camp outside and always kept a sleeping bag and 2 gallons of water in his truck, and could start a fire with a piece of flint if he had to. He picked my mother up on Friday nights while the other kibbutzniks lay on blankets under a giant movie screen on the grass, petting dogs and getting high. He drove her to the Dead Sea, where they floated strangely. 5. The Dead Sea is the lowest place on Earth. 6. No 2 people looked less alike than my mother and father. When my mother's body turned brown and my father laughed and said she was getting to look more like him every day, it was a joke because where he was 6'3" with bright green eyes and black hair, my mother is pale and so small that even now, at 41, if you saw her from across the street, you could mistake her for a girl. Bert is small and fair like her, and I am tall like my father. I am also black-haired, cap-toothed, skinny in a bad way, and 15. 7. There is a photograph of my mother that no one has ever seen. In the fall, my mother went back to England to start university. Her pockets were full of sand from the lowest place on Earth. She weighed 104 pounds. There's a story she sometimes tells about the train ride from Paddington Station to Oxford when she met a photographer who was almost completely blind. He wore dark sunglasses and said he'd damaged his retinas a decade ago on a trip to Antarctica. His suit was perfectly pressed, and he held his camera in his lap. He said he saw the world differently now, and it wasn't necessarily bad. He asked if he could take a picture of her. When he raised up the lens and looked through it, my mother asked what he saw. The same thing I always see, he said. Which is? A blur, he said. Then why do you do it? She asked. In case my eyes ever heal, he said. So I'll know what I've been looking at. In my mother's lap, there was a brown paper bag with a chopped liver sandwich my grandmother had made for her. She offered the sandwich to the almost completely blind photographer. Aren't you hungry? He asked. She told him that she was, but that she'd never told her mother that she hated chopped liver, and eventually it became too late to tell her, having said nothing for years. The train pulled into Oxford Station, and my mother got off, leaving behind her a trail of sand. I know there is a moral to this story, but I don't know what it is. 8. My mother is the most stubborn person I know. After 5 minutes, she decided that she hated Oxford. The first week of term, my mother did nothing but sit in her room in a drafty stone building watching the rain fall on the cows in Christchurch Meadow, feeling sorry for herself. She had to heat up water for tea on a hot plate. To see her tutor, she had to climb 56 stone stairs and bang on the door until he woke up from the cot in his study, where he slept under a pile of papers. She wrote to my father in Israel almost every day on expensive French stationery, and when she ran out of that, she wrote to him on graph paper torn out of a notebook. In one of these letters, which I found hidden in an old Cadbury's tin under the sofa in her study, she wrote, "The book you gave me is sitting on my desk, and every day I learn to read it a little more." The reason she had to learn to read it is because it was written in Spanish. She watched her body turn pale again in the mirror. During the second week of term, she bought a used bicycle and rode around tacking up posters that said, "Wanted, Hebrew tutor," because languages came easily to her, and she wanted to be able to understand my father. A few people applied, but only one didn't back out when my mother explained that she couldn't pay. A pimply boy named Nehemiah from Haifa, who was in his first year and as miserable as my mother, and who felt, according to a letter she wrote to my father, the company of a girl was reason enough to agree to meet twice a week at the King's Arms for nothing more than the price of his beer. My mother was also teaching herself Spanish out of a book called Teach Yourself Spanish. first on her exams, and despite her parents' objections, dropped out of university and went to live with my father in Tel Aviv. 9. What followed were the happiest years of their lives. They lived in a sunny house covered with bougainvillea in Ramat Gan. My father planted an olive tree and a lemon tree in the garden and dug a little trench around each for water to collect. They listened to American music on his shortwave radio. When the windows were open and the wind was blowing in the right direction, they could smell the sea. Eventually they got married on the beach in Tel Aviv, and for their honeymoon they spent 2 months traveling in South America. When they returned, my mother started translating books into English, first from Spanish and later from Hebrew too. 5 years passed like that, and then my father got offered a job he couldn't turn down, working for an American company in the aerospace industry. Then they moved to New York and had me. While my mother was pregnant with me, she read 3 gazillion books on a wide variety of subjects. She didn't like America, but she didn't hate it either. 2.5 years and 8 gazillion books later, she had Bert. Then we moved to Brooklyn. 11. I was 6 when my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. That year, my mother and I were driving together in the car. She asked me to pass her bag. I don't have it, I said. Maybe it's in the back, she said. But it wasn't in the back. She pulled over and searched the car, but the bag was nowhere to be found. She put her head in her hands and tried to remember where she left her bag. She was always losing things. One of these days, she said, I'm going to lose my head. I tried to picture what would happen if she lost her head. In the end, though, it was my father who lost everything. Weight, his hair, various internal organs. 12. He liked to cook and laugh and sing, could start a fire with his hands, fix things that were broken, and explain how to launch things into space. But he died within 9 months. 13. My father was not a famous Russian writer. At first, my mother kept everything exactly as he left it. According to Misha Slavsky, that was what they do with famous writers' houses in Russia. But my father wasn't a famous writer. He wasn't even Russian. Then one day I came home from school, and every obvious sign of him was gone. The closets were cleared of his clothes, his shoes were gone from by the door, and out in the street, next to a pile of garbage bags, stood his old chair. I went up to my bedroom and watched it through the window. The wind sent leaves cartwheeling past it on the sidewalk. An old man passed by and sat in it. I went out and fished his sweater out of the trash bin. 14. At the end of the world. After my father died, Uncle Julian, my mother's brother, who was an art historian and lives in London, sent me a Swiss army knife that What can I do for you? I love you so much. And I always wanted to say, but never said, love me less. 16. Everything is remade as reason. One day, my mother got up from the bed she had been lying in for almost a year. It seemed like the first time we had seen her not through all the winter glasses that had collected around her bed, and which, in his boredom, Bird would sometimes try to make sing with a wet finger around the rims. She made macaroni and cheese, one of the few things she knows how to cook. We pretended it was the best thing we'd ever eaten. One afternoon, she took me aside. From now on, she said, I'm going to treat you like an adult. I'm only 8, I wanted to say, but didn't. She started to work again. She roamed the house in a kimono printed with red flowers, and wherever she went, a trail of crumpled pages followed. Before Dad died, she used to be neater, but now if you wanted to find her, all you had to do was follow the pages of crossed out words, and at the end of the trail she'd be there, looking out the window or into a glass of water as if there were a fish in it that only she could see. Number 17. Carrots. With my allowance, I bought a book called Edible Plants and Flowers in North America. I learned that you could leach the bitterness out of acorns by boiling them in water, that wild roses are edible, and that you should avoid anything that smells of almond, has a 3-leaved growth pattern, or has milky sap. I tried to identify as many plants as I could in Prospect Park because I knew it would be a long time before I'd be able to recognize every plant, and because there was always the chance that I have to survive in some place other than North America. I also memorized the universal edibility test. It's a good idea to know, since some poisonous plants, like hemlock, can look similar to some edible plants, like wild carrots and parsnips. To do the test, you have to first not eat for 8 hours. Then you separate the plant into its different parts: root, leaf, stem, bud, and flower, and test a small piece of one on the inside of your wrist. If nothing happens, touch it to the inside of your lip for 3 minutes, and if nothing happens after that, hold it on your tongue for 15 minutes. If nothing still happens, you can chew it without swallowing, and hold that in your mouth for 15 minutes. And if nothing happens after that, swallow and wait 8 hours. And if nothing happens after that, eat a quarter of a cup's worth. And if nothing happens after that, it's edible. I kept edible plants and flowers in North America under my bed in a backpack that also had my father's Swiss Army knife, a flashlight, a plastic tarp, a compass, a box of granola bars, 2 bags of peanut M&Ms, 3 cans of tuna, a can opener, Band-Aids, a snake bite kit, a change of underwear, and a New York City subway map. It really should have also had a piece of flint, but when I tried to buy one at the hardware store, they wouldn't sell it to me, either because I was too young or because they thought I was a pyromaniac. In an emergency, you can always strike a spark using a hunting knife and a piece of jasper, agate, or jade, but I didn't know where to find jasper, agate, or jade. Instead, I took some matches from the 2nd Street Cafe and I put them in a Ziploc bag to protect them from the rain. For Chinooka, I asked for a sleeping bag. The one my mother got for me had pink hearts on it, was made of flannel, and would keep me alive for about 5 seconds in sub-zero temperatures before I died of hypothermia. I asked her if we could take it back and get a heavy weight down bag instead. Where are you planning to sleep? The Arctic Circle, she asked. I thought, there, or maybe the Peruvian Andes, since that's where Dad once camped. To change the subject, I told her about hemlock, wild carrots, and parsnip, but that turned out to be a bad idea because her eyes got teary, and when I asked her what was wrong, she said nothing. It just reminded her of the carrots Dad used to grow in the garden in Ramat Gan. I wanted to ask her what else he used to grow aside from an olive tree, a lemon tree, and carrots, but I didn't want to make her even sadder. I started to keep a notebook called How to Survive in the Wild. 18. My mother never fell out of love with my father. She's kept her love for him as alive as the summer they first met. In order to do this, she's turned life away. Sometimes she subsists for days sometimes just to paint a head, you have to give up the whole figure. To paint a leaf, you have to sacrifice the whole landscape. It might seem like you're limiting yourself at first, but after a while you realize that having a quarter of an inch of something, you have a better chance of holding on to a certain feeling of the universe than if you pretended to be doing the whole sky. My mother did not choose a leaf or a head. She chose my father, and to hold on to a certain feeling, she sacrificed the world. 19. The wall of dictionaries between my mother and the world gets taller every year. Sometimes pages of the dictionaries come loose and gather at her feet. Shallon, shallop, shallot, shallow, shalom, shum, shaman, shamble, like the petals of an immense flower. When I was little, I thought that the pages on the floor were words she would never be able to use again, and I tried to tape them back in where they belonged out of fear that one day she would be left silent. 20. My mother has only been on 2 dates since my father died. The first was 5 years ago, when I was 10, with a fat English editor at one of the houses that publishes her translations. On his left pinky, he wore a ring with a family crest that may or may not have been his own. Whether he was talking about himself, he waved that hand. A conversation occurred in which it was established that my mother and this man, Lyle, had been at Oxford at the same time. On the strength of his coincidence, he'd asked her out. Plenty of men have asked my mother out, and she always said no. For some reason, this time she agreed. On Saturday night, she appeared in the living room with her hair swept up, wearing the red shawl my father bought for her in Peru. "How do I look?" she asked. She looked beautiful, but somehow it didn't seem fair to wear it. There wasn't time to say anything because right then Lyle arrived at the front door, panting. He made himself comfortable on the sofa. I asked him if he knew anything about wilderness survival, and he said, "Absolutely." I asked him if he knew the difference between hemlock and wild carrots, and he gave me a blow-by-blow account of the final moments of an Oxford regatta during which his boat pulled forward to win during the last 3 seconds. "Holy cow," I said, in a way that could have been interpreted as sarcastic. Lyle also recalled fond memories of punting on that Sherwell. I might be saying that wrong. My mother said she wouldn't know. Since she never punted on the Sherwell, I thought, well, I'm not surprised. After they left, I stayed up watching a TV program about the albatrosses of Antarctica. They can go years without touching the ground, sleep aloft in the sky, drink seawater, cry out the salt, and return year after year to raise babies with the same mate. I must have fallen asleep because when I heard my mother's key in the lock, it was almost 1 a.m. A few girls had fallen down around her neck, and her mascara was smudged. But when I asked her how it went, she said she knew orangutans with whom she could carry on more exciting conversations. About a year later, Bird fractured his wrist trying to leap off our neighbor's balcony, and the tall, stooped doctor who treated him in the emergency room asked my mother on a date. Maybe it was because he made Bird smile even though his hand was turned at a terrible angle from his wrist. But for the second time since my father died, my mother said yes. The doctor's name was Henry Lavender, which I thought boded well. Amma Lavender. When the doorbell rang, Bird streaked down the stairs naked, before his cast, put "That's Amore" on the record player, and streaked back up. My mother shot down the stairs not wearing her red shawl and pulled up the needle. The record gave out a screech. It spun noiselessly on the turntable while Henry Lavender came in and accepted a glass of cold white wine and told us about his collection of seashells, many of which he dove for himself on trips to the Philippines. I imagined our future together in which he would take us on diving expeditions, the 4 of us smiling at each other through our masks under the sea. The next morning, I asked my mother how it had gone. She said he was a perfectly nice man. I saw this as a positive thing, but when Henry Lavender called that afternoon, my mother was at the supermarket and didn't call him back. 2 days later, he made another attempt. This time my mother was going for a walk in the park. I said, "You're not going to call him back, are you?" out posthumous Nobels. I slipped into the kitchen with the portable. Dr. Lavender, I said, and then I told him that I thought my mother actually liked him, and even though a normal person would probably be very happy to talk to him and even go out again, I'd known my mother for 11.5 years, and she'd never done anything normal. 21. I thought it was just that she hadn't met the right person. The fact that she stayed home all day in her pajamas translating books by mostly dead people didn't seem to help matters much. Sometimes she would get stuck on a certain sentence for hours and go around like a dog with a bone until she'd shriek out, "I've got it!" and scurry off to her desk to dig a hole and bury it. I decided to take things into my own hands. One day, a veterinarian named Dr. Tucci came to speak to my 6th grade class. He had a nice voice and a green parrot named Gordo who perched on his shoulder and stared moodily out the window. He also had an iguana, 2 ferrets, a box turtle, 3 frogs, a duck with a broken wing, and a boa constrictor named Mahatma who'd recently shed his skin. He kept 2 llamas in his backyard. After class, while everyone else was handling Mahatma, I asked if he was married and when. With a puzzled expression, he said no. I asked for his business card. It had a picture of a monkey on it, and a few kids lost interest in the snake and started demanding business cards too. That night, I found an attractive snapshot of my mother in a bathing suit to send to Dr. Frank Tucci, along with a typed list of her best qualities. These included high IQ, big reader, attractive, see photo, funny. Bart looked over the list and after some thought suggested I add opinionated, which was a word I taught him, and also stubborn. When I said I didn't think those were her best or even good qualities, Bert said if they were on the list, it might make it seem like they were good, and then if Dr. Tucci agreed to meet her, he wouldn't be put off. This seemed like a fair argument at the time, so I added opinionated and stubborn. At the bottom, I wrote our telephone number. Then I mailed it. A week passed and he didn't call. 3 days went by and I wondered if maybe I shouldn't have written opinionated and stubborn. The next day the telephone rang and I heard my mother say, "Frank who?" There was a long silence. "Excuse me." Another silence. Then she started laughing hysterically. She got off the phone and came to my room. "What was that all about?" I asked innocently. "The person who just called," I said. "What was that all about?" My mother asked, even more innocently. "The person who just called," I said. "Oh, that," she said. "I hope you don't mind. I arranged a double date. Me and the snake charmer and you and Herman Cooper." Herman Cooper was an 8th grade nightmare who lived on our block, called everyone penis, and hooted at the huge balls on our neighbor's dog. "I'd rather lick the sidewalk," I said. I'm gonna stop there. I promise this book isn't only sad, it's extremely beautiful. If you enjoyed this, give this video a like. Leave a comment if you have any suggestions for me. Please check out my other long-form content that aren't ASMR videos because I work very hard on them, and I'm educating people about PTSD because it's something I suffer deeply from every day of my life, and I think it's extremely important to be educated about it. So please check those videos out, please. It means so much to me. Subscribe to my channel and make sure to hit that notification bell so that you're notified when I come out with more ASMR videos for you, my dear. Whatever you are doing, have a good day, good night, good evening. Bye, guys. Better. Only a last scrap. Whatever you're doing, have a good day, good night, good evening. Thank you so much for watching. Bye, guys. It's all falling apart. Oh, gosh. Hey, I'm gonna read you some more of this bedtime might be nice though. Let's see. So, I want to say before I start, I was rewatching number 3 in this series recently because as of filming this, that's all I've posted onto YouTube. But I have recorded up to 9 and edited up to number 5 in this series. And this is number 10, I think, recording. But I realized, it took me so long to realize, this book is about, and I'm pretty sure it's written by one of the children of the main character's love interest.